Hey, I'm gonna give things a minute or two before I get started, but I didn't want to bother with the starting soon screen. So I'm just gonna do my pre-setup stuff live. Pin this manually. Here we go. Okay. And I can get rid of that. And this is what is happening right now. Okay. So, hey, it's Wednesday, September 18th, and my name is Rob, that developer dad around here. And yeah, I'm building a dotNet app. Blazor is the front end. I'm using Azure OpenAI and Azure SQL Database in the back end, and it's all hosted in an Azure App Service. When it's deployed, I haven't pushed new code to it in well over a week at this point, but I want to get this tracking stuff in place before I push the new version. So this morning, I started integrating the usage manager into the workload provider and started doing a bunch of stuff. Now, for some reason, it thinks I did not add this. And I probably goofed up on the method name. Load user quotas. Load user quotas. There it is. Save. So I did add a load user quotas method to the character workloads. And to do, maybe refactor this out to a different workload manager if, when it makes sense. This guy isn't really related to generating NPCs or characters or anything like that. This is more like a administrative slash back-end infrastructural goo type thing, but it's the only method right now, and I don't want to stand up a whole new workload manager and proxy down the app or anything like that just for one single method at this point in time. So I'm just going to mark it as a maybe refactor that out if we decide we need to do so later. So the next step that I have to take to be able to pull user quotas down into the application during the login and sign in process and everything like that is add a method to my service proxy. Now let's take a look at these methods here. Generate random NPC. This has 0 references. I don't feel bad removing this at this point. So generate random NPC, NPC client model, get AI description, save NPC, filter townsfolk, load it NPC. All right. Now we're also going to need to add a public async task that's going to have an op result of some kind of quota model. Now, I don't want to use the same one. Hey, what's up, C Films? I don't want to use the same model that the manager uses. I need to create probably a more UI friendly yeah, sort of a UI specific form of that model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new class inside the Blazor application, and it's going to be called user limits. And I'm going to rename that. User limits model. Yes. And it's going to have a collection of limited resources. Rename. Whoops. Don't want to rename. I want to add. Add class limited resource model. Now, that limited resource model is going to have string resource title, public string, budget, get set, and it's not a string, it's an int, and it's unit budget, and it's going to have a public int consumed units, get set. And another thing it's going to have is a quota ID. Pardon me. I'm still getting over COVID. How do you keep a development project maintainable? That is a very big question. See films. What do you? I don't fully grok the question here. What are you asking specifically, or is this a joke? Because sometimes you ask me questions that are that turn out to be dad jokes. All right. So user limits model, we're going to need, well, first we'll need a constructor. Oh, when do I decide to get rid of unnecessary code? Typically what I'll do is if I've added code that I decide isn't necessary when during the same development cycle, like before I've committed the code to the repository, I'll just delete it. Like if I second guess a decision I've made during the current session or the current batch of sessions where I'm making a whole bunch of changes into one set of commits, if the code got created during that cycle or it isn't already deployed somewhere, I'll just delete it right then and there. If it's code that's already out there, what I'll typically do is rather than Boy Scout and make a change that's unrelated to my current objective, what I'll do is I'll mark it with a to-do and create a GitHub item for it. And then this morning I linked one of those GitHub items right inside the to-do comment, which is something I haven't done before in this project, but it's getting to a size where I need to start doing that just for my own accountability and protecting myself from myself. And I'll actually prioritize going in and taking care of that pruning when I get to, say, I'll decide to take a week to go and clean up technical debt or dead code or what have you. That's when I'll look at all of those work items in my GitHub project and prioritize those and pull them from to do into in progress one at a time, and just have a whole series of commits for that one batch. And I'll just knock them all out all at once. So public string user ID is a get set. Did that answer your question? It's really just a matter of self-discipline. C films, and of course, GitHub projects. There's like a rudimentary Kanban board there, like this. As I spot things in the code that I want to change, I'll create a to-do for them, just so that I don't forget. And occasionally I'll just come in here and review the to-dos versus, what I know I've done and so on. And yeah, you might want to mark that code with like a comment of some sort, maybe with the date that you created it or the date that you noticed it. And then like if you come back to it 6 months later and you see that it still hasn't changed or anything like that, and it's still not being referenced or whatever, wrap some tests around the functionality and get rid of it. Of course, that's for personal projects. If it's a corporate project or for somebody else, then you're on a team, that gets a little dicier. Available in the UI process, but not the UI. Okay, yeah. I'm working through this process. All right. So, quotas. User limits model, we've got this. And I am going to have a private list of limited resource model limits. Okay, yeah, for personal projects, be ruthless, man. You can always go back in your commit history and bring something back if you find out, oops, I really needed that. So we'll instantiate that, and user ID equals string.empty. Boop. And Control S. What's this complaining about? Oh, I'm using it like a method. Man, this COVID is doing not fun things to my brain. And I don't like this limited resource model limits. I don't like it one bit. I'm going to get rid of that. GitHub does have a free thing. I'm using the free thing, and you can have like a number of limited private repositories, and 10 out of 10 do recommend public limited resource model AI NPC AI descriptions get set, and I want to do a private set on this. And public limited resource model NPCs in storage. Get private set. Yeah, it's really easy to make a really messy GitHub layout. The best way I've found to combat that is really just a little bit of planning ahead and having having sort of like a personal standard project layout that you like to use. Give me a minute and I'll show you how I've got mine laid out. And it's not, it's not like a standard or anything like that I've been following for years. This is a structure that I've learned to use relatively recently in comparison to the length of my prior career. I'll show you the layout of the repository in just a minute. There's something I want to fix up here. This limited resource model. First off, I'm going to make this internal. Because this class is going to be used outside of the Blazor application. And I'm going to require, I'm not even going to key this off string. I'm going to metered resource kind. And I'm going to change that resource title from string to that equals resource kind. And we're going to make this a private set. In fact, the only times this is going to get instantiated and altered is when it's coming back from a service call. So I'm going to be really, really, really draconian in how this is put together. Private set, cool. I'm going to make this init, and I'm going to make this init as well. Now, new limited resource model, metered resource kind, dot AI detail, metered resource kind NPC storage. Here we go. Great. Now I can come back out to my service proxy, and this is going to be an op result of user limits model, load user limits. It's going to take in a string user ID and op result of user limits model and proxy result, new, one of those, user limits, model, proxy payload is null. Last two lines are return proxy result, proxy result dot payload equals proxy payload. And then we're going to try, and we're going to catch. Excuse me. Do we have a logger up here? Nope, we don't. Read only I logger NPC service proxy nullable logger I logger NPC service proxy logger all right, come back down the bottom of the class to here. Ah, yes. Internal. Sup, Erkamus? All right. So before I start implementing in here, I did say I would show how I have my GitHub repository organized. And we'll go into GM Tools. So at the top level, I of course have my git ignore, readme. I'm not sure what this .ds store is. Blah, blah, blah. So I've got an immediate subfolder for source, an immediate subfolder for docs. There's .vs code that probably doesn't need to be here. The GitHub workflows are all defined in there. And if I were using source control, like the same source control for my database stuff, it'd all go in here. But I haven't fully decided whether I'm going to commit to this. I might try to find a different way of doing that. But inside doc, it's just some readmes, features, and I'm horribly behind the times on keeping this documentation up to date. I've got the images that are referenced by those documents, and then out in source, that's where the actual solution and all of the project folders are stored. Prior to start using this model, I just put the solution and all the project folders and stuff like that right here at the top level. And it's only recently that I've gotten into the habit of putting all the source code into the source folder and having a discrete folder for documentation and all of that stuff. But that's really it. It's pretty simple. Of course, once your repository is mature or in use, it's a whole lot harder to reorganize it to this level. Images in terms of things that I'm going to use for documentation or that are going to be part of the application that I want deployed with the application, yes, those will get committed to GitHub. I haven't gotten there yet, but eventually I'm going to be putting a whole lot of image assets into www root to reference throughout the application, and I want those to travel with the application code rather than putting them in like some sort of blob storage or whatever, and then having to link over and consume, like make those additional network calls to a remote image repository. All right. So catching, the pattern is GUID xid equals GUID.new GUID string message. I gotta spell it right. Equals could not load the quotas for user ID. We're gonna log error exid. Nope. Derp. What are you complaining about? I had the logger up here, you silly goose. Okay, now it's behaving itself. ex and exid.toString. There we go. And proxy result.add error exid message. Save. All right, now if, well, we haven't even invoked the API yet, have we? So var API result equals npc API.load user quotas user ID if API result dot was successful What are you complaining about? Oh, duh. Else API result dot copy errors to ref proxy result. And copy errors to is just a little method that I added to the opResult class so that I don't have to copy the errors manually anymore, because that was starting to get ugly. And var API payload equals API result dot payload. If API payload is null, proxy result dot add error now. And also API result dot payload is not null. So I need to var AI usage equals new, pardon me, no, proxy payload equals new user limits model, and I'll provide user ID equals API payload dot user ID. Using a Mac keyboard on a Windows machine sometimes, frequently, trips me up. Proxy payload dot NPCs in storage dot, oh, this is going to get wordy. This is going to get really wordy. I continually using command to bounce to the end of the line, but I should be using function to quickly bounce. And Michael Bartak, I don't want to buy followers. Goodbye. The only bots on my channel are the ones that I write. Proxy payload, NPCs in storage. This is going to get really, really, really frickin' clumsy. Let's code it out and see if we can make it a little less awful. NPCs in storage dot QuotaId. I'm not typing in the right place. QuotaId equals API payload dot NPC storage dot QuotaId. Okay, yeah. This is going to be a big ugly mess because this is not assignable outside of the constructor. So I totally goofed that design. Now, since these guys are internal, I know what I can do. Private set. I'll take this. There we go. Public void set values int QuotaId int unit budget it pardon me. Now I'll come out to the service proxy. Proxy payload dot npcs and storage dot set values, and I can API payload dot storage dot QuotaId, API payload dot storage dot budget API payload dot npc storage dot spell it right or you'll lose your IntelliSense dot consumed. Consumption. Proxy payload dot npc AI descriptions dot set values, and I'll go API payload dot generations QuotaId budget. Come on. Oh, it's not going to guess for me. Payload dot npc dot consumption. There we go. Save. What's all this bitching about? API payload is not null. I'm just going to go ahead and put a null forgiving on all of this stuff. I don't know why it's complaining about that. The quota thing is really just to limit the number of resources that my paid users can consume during a month, so that I don't go broke if somebody goes crazy and consumes like 5 million tokens. That's going to cost me a bundle. So what I'm doing is just setting up what I think is a fairly generous limit on NPC generations. Under reasonable usage, I don't think anybody's going to be generating 100 NPCs a month. If they are, kudos to you for being a world builder. But yeah, I'm originally going to limit it to 100 NPCs generated with an upper limit of 100 NPCs stored. And if that turns out to be too stingy, then I'll increase those limits. If it turns out to be too generous, I can decrease them or raise the price or whatever. And of course, there's going to be other things that, other features that I add that consume AI in different amounts that may consume AI credits at a faster or slower rate or what have you. So I'll figure those out as I go. But just this morning, I got the code in there to track the actual tokens in, tokens out from the LLM. And right now, I'm just, each NPC you generate consumes one of your monthly amount. Storage is going to work on a slightly different scale, because storage, I'm going to like give you an allotment at sign up, and that's what you got. if you run out, you can delete NPCs that you don't need anymore. So that is that. We're getting our user limits. It's local to this thing. And the user limits model, I'm second guessing myself that the user limits should be in the application, or should it be in the Game Tools framework? Thinking. Cross that bridge in a minute. I'm going to come into my AppState provider. And uninitialized async, set user context. Okay. No. This is going to get refactored. Quick actions and refactorings. Are you going to give me a quick actions and refactorings for this? No? All right. Get current user. And, excuse me, public async task get user limits bool load if null no. How do I want to do this? Public async task set user limits and app context dot is there a retrieve item? There is. String context key equals name of user limits model var limits stored limits equals app context dot retrieve item, context key, as user limits model, there we go, if stored limits is null, I've been flipping back and forth between SQL and C# too much the past few days. All right, then app context dot add context key limits. Else app context dot update context key limits. Save changes async. Bam. I gotta await that. Set user limits. State provider set user limits. Yeah, I'm gonna have to come back and make this public. And I'm gonna have to make this public as well. Yes. Save all. Yeah. Okay, so AppState provider, set user limits, and at inject nope, NPC service proxy service proxy app context, maybe null, get current user, public user limits model, get user limits, user ID. No, just get user limits. Async task of user limits model. Get user limits and excuse me. Var. No, we don't need that yet. Var model equals app context dot retrieve item copy that, paste it, context key as user limits model if model is null, model equals await service proxy dot load user limits, user ID. We're going to need to get the user ID from the app context equals get current user dot user ID. What's this complaining about? Now, how am I running get current user? Load if null. I'm going to make that true. And if it can't load, it's going to freak out. User ID, model equals await service proxy, load user limits. Op result. Var proxy result, because I'm using the call and request pattern. If proxy result dot was successful, and also proxy result dot payload is not equal to null, model equals proxy result dot payload. Good. Await set user limits. And return model. Bam. Possible null reference return. Yeah. If model is null, then we're going to have to throw some kind of exception. Throw new exception. We'll just do that. And string messages. No. I think we got to go to op result. Now this is down in op result of t. Add error, copy errors to public string aggregate errors. String builder, SB equals new, string builder, SB dot append line, no, SP dot append, errors occurred while processing activity. For each var error in this dot errors, SB dot append line, error dot value, and then we're going to return SB dot to string, to a string. Silly fat fingers. There we go. So now I can come out here to my AppState provider and say string ex message equals proxy result dot aggregate errors, and pass that here, and there we go. And that'll bubble out somewhere, I'm sure. So we've just theoretically added this to the AppState provider. Let's try the NPC service proxy, load user quotas, that's for load user limits. Get AI description. I believe we've already modified this guy. Nope. Oh, that's right. We did that up in here. So we'll go to the implementation of this method. And this morning we brought in string user ID. Instead of bringing in string user ID, I think I want to bring in user ID int user AI quota ID. Yeah, that works. Now I'm going to need to add this to the service contract. Oh, hey, what's up, Rev? I'm going to keep going for a little bit longer, probably not super long, but a little while. Go to definition and generate NPC, describe, that one's being deprecated. Here we are. I'm going to add this guy here, the AI quota ID. I also need to add it here. Int user storage quota ID. Save. Pop out to the implementation. Oh, stop it. Save all of that. Character workloads. Yes, I know. Just describe NPC. Generate attributes. That's the part that I can fix in a minute. Parse from JSON. Where the hell is save NPC? Here we go. There. I'll use those properties in a minute. I'm going to come back to this. So I'm going to drop a bookmark right there. And let's come back up to... Here we are. I no longer need to pull in this. That can go bye-bye. I no longer need to load the quota async, because now I'm passing all the stuff that I need, user AI quota ID, in with the call, because I'm storing it in the application state. Theoretically. Now, I'm going to have a big fat compiler error when I build this, because I've modified the public contract that the UI, our NPC service proxy, is expecting to see, or is expecting to be able to call when it calls into character workloads. Oh yeah, we sure have. And that's okay, because we're going to come over here. We've got get AI description, VM JSON, npc.owner ID, And we're going to be able to pass in the int user AI quota ID. All right. And I'm going to pass this user AI quota ID. Cool. And then I'm going to need to add int user storage quota ID. And I can pass this here. NPC dot owner ID and user storage quota ID. Save. API payload may or may not be anything there. And now, over in the places that are calling into these things, they're going to break now too. So I'm going to close out these guys. Character workloads is probably in a pretty good state. NPC client model, I don't need to mess with that. But over here in the page model, we've got some stuff. So we've got the user.userID, var user limits equals app context dot get user limits. Bam. And in the get AI description, it needs to know the AI quota ID, user limits dot AI, nope, user limits dot what? Oh. Now it's a user limits model. Dot NPC AI descriptions dot quota ID. Save. And I've got another little red dot over here in my Explorer. It needs the user storage quota. Current user. Var user limits equals await app context dot get user limits. Groovy. And I'm actually going to go dot. Oh, I can't do that. What I can do is go user limits dot storage dot quota ID and pass that. Now, I'm not doing anything with that yet, but I'm set up to use it. So I'll go to the implementation. If API result was successful, we're going to do these things. And counts person NPC data, npc.npc model, bool is new character equals npc data dot npc dot id. Do I have an ID on here? Equals 0. If is new character, we're going to await, excuse me, var quota update equals await NPC API. Oh, we're not going to do this here. Save. Client model, proxy payload, blah, 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 blah. We're going to come up to save NPC. Go to implementation. Save townsperson. And I'm going to bring this over here. Burp. And we'll go back to the service proxy where I just was. I don't need his new character here. That can go bye-bye. Instead, we do it in here. There. NPC.id, NPC manager, save townsperson. Okay. This returns the op result of townsperson. If is new character. Var quota update equals await usage manager dot consume quota async. It is going to be user storage quota ID by 1. To do, modify this operations contract to also carry back the updated user quota information. And update the user limits stored in app context. That's a tomorrow problem. Right now, I want to test all of this code that I wrote. So the first test, we're going to clean the solution. I didn't want to run the code analysis. That was silly. I want to clean. And it's cleaning. Clean, clean, clean. Brush, brush, brush. And I want to rebuild. Build, build, build. And then I'm going to drop a breakpoint here. And I'm going to open up the Azure portal over here on my other monitor. And I'm going to poke the database to start it waking up. Because I haven't yet added the resiliency code, but we're going to do that real soon, maybe the latter half of this week. Yeah, the database is still on the pause status, so I'm just going to give it a little pokey poke by trying to log in. And it's resuming. By the time this is done building, it'll be done resuming. And let's see here. I want to take another look and debug. I'm going to delete all of my breakpoints. Yeah, get lost. I'm going to put one here. All right. And then I'm going to go up to the, where were we? Up here. And I'm going to drop this breakpoint here. Yeah, it seems like a good enough place for it. Actually, you know what? No. I'm going to drop this breakpoint here. Because I just want to make sure these calls happen. And I got to add some logging there, apparently. But our app's running. Let's log in. And I'll log in as the simulated customer who is paying for AI usage. Come into NPCs. And we created a couple this morning. But I'm just going to create another one. No. Retired miner. There's a hermit. Yeah, okay. He could be drinking in a pub. Let's create the AI description. We're going to hit a breakpoint in just a second. Come on. Where are you at? Ooh, something somewhere is failing. I bet. Oh yeah. Something's croaked. So that means I've got something wacky going on. Probably in the page model. I bet something crappy is happening in get user limits. Let's go to that definition here. Oh yeah, whatever. I'll open this up and I'm going to drop a breakpoint right here. And I bet that I'm going to come back to a failure of some sort. Maybe. So let's create. Looks like it silently failed. So yeah. Now let's generate the AI description. So we've got that. Our user limits model. We'll step over this. And we'll try to retrieve it. Model's going to be null. Try to get the current user. We've got their ID. We'll try to load the user limits. We are successful. We have our payload. Proxy result. Here's our model. We've got our limited resource models. Step into set user limits. We'll add it to the app context. Save changes async. Okay, user limits. And we'll go boop. Rob's got no brains. There we go. There. Let's try it again. All right, we'll sign in. And this is why we test, friends. Because I didn't write something correctly. I forgot one little word, and the whole thing went on me. Okay, let's try it again. Name of user limits, retrieve item, it's null. We've got to go get it. We have it now. We'll set our user limits, return the model, set owner, and then over here, I've got my quota ID. So we'll step in, and it's going to do some stuff. And I should have usage entry. Fantastic. So we can go bounce, bounce, return those character attributes, and we'll continue. So we know that worked. Let's save. And let's see if it's actually stored. Our model is not null. So let's continue. Manager result equals save townsperson. All right. Is new character is false. NPC ID equals 18. How did it get an NPC ID prior to saving it? I'm going to have to run this again and see what's what. Excuse me. So let's go back to the list. I'm going to create another new one. Yeah, why not? Generate. We know this is functioning now. Continue. All right, we got all that stuff. Continue. All right, good. Now we shouldn't have an NPC ID yet. Age years, ID is null. All right, that's okay. Immediate window, I'm going to say is new character equals true. Bam. All right. Now our NPC should now have an ID of 19 as predicted. Is new character true? Let's step. We'll update the quota. We should get the updated quota back. User ID, storage should be updated. It's not 13 anymore. It's actually higher than that. But we should also be able to see our consumption has ticked up as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue. We've got all the stuff. We've saved them. We can go back to the list. And that's pretty sweet. And guess what we're probably going to do tomorrow is get rid of this placeholder text and put something like a little bit of quota information to say you are using so many of your available slots to store NPCs. All right. I think I want to, now that I'm using a different AI model that's a little bit better at following instructions, because Phi 3 was really, really wordy and chatty and tended to yammer on. I had to really restrict and get really forceful about be brief, but this is a little too brief, I think. It's nice to see that it's respecting their pronouns, though, because Phi wasn't always great about that either. But yeah. Cool. So I've got a little bit of cleanup to do. I've got a little bit of thinking, a little bit of refactoring, namely in that whenever we perform an operation that alters the state of the user's quotas, in addition to the object that's coming back, we're going to need to bring that updated state back as well. So I think I either need to introduce some events, but that's getting a little bit into crazy town, or I need to change the type that's carried by this op result so that it carries both the operational payload as well as any sort of administrative updates that may be coming back from these operations as they execute. So I think we have ourselves a completed session. Just for laughs, just before we go, I'm going to go into the query editor over here. Excuse me. And it's running. And I'm going to say select star from usage.UserQuotas. I'll try not to die, but I can see that my AI budget's ticked up. My storage budget has ticked up a little bit. I need to do a little bit more work there because I know that doesn't align with my the number of saved people that I've got. But the other thing I want to take a look at is usage.token consumption. Oh, jeepers creepers. Query editor, why are you so terrible? Run. And I now have a handy dandy little report of when, how many tokens went in, how many tokens came out, and which function was used, and who invoked the method. So that's going to help me make decisions about things like actual quota stuff, how I could iterate on the different AI functions that I'm invoking, limits that are being placed around those functions themselves, stuff like that. This information is going to be incredibly useful as I refine those prompts. It's not necessarily ever going to get shown to an end user because this is like egghead nerd stuff that I'm capturing here. But it's really going to inform decisions that I make as a developer and manager of this product as time goes by. So just to recap, we have integrated the user limits down into AppState. So we're recording those, and we're also obtaining and caching them in the application state as required. We're even going so far as to stuff those into the browser session storage. And with browser session storage, that object survives for as long as the active browser tab. So the moment you close the tab, that storage goes gone. And it also doesn't retain that state from tab instance to tab instance. So that's something I can live with. It doesn't go into long-term browser storage. Somebody can't like hack into the browser and look at their user information and stuff like that while they're not actively using it. Cool. I like it. We are recording when somebody uses the AI to generate an NPC. We're recording whenever a brand new character null, not zero. And because that's an evaluatable expression, I want to wrap that in parens just for readability. When a new character is being saved, we're incrementing the amount of storage quota that's being used. And tomorrow, we're going to have to think about modifying these contracts, these operation contracts, to carry that updated quota information back to the UI whenever an operation that consumes quota occurs. And that's going to be a lot less difficult than it sounds because we are using this operation result concept. We may extend it a little bit, or I might just create a new class that wraps those things up. We'll see. So I'm going to conclude today's session. I think we made some really great progress. I need to go vacuum out my lungs or something like that to get rid of this rumbly crap that's been plaguing me since COVID set in. And I will see you all tomorrow. Take care of yourselves out there. It's a mean, mean world. Try not to make it meaner for yourself than you have to. And happy coding. See you tomorrow.